Today on the show, fantasy football, this or that. At one point, we've all been on the clock, deciding between two players in the same exact round, feeling like one will make our season and the other one's going to break it. So today we'll talk about 11 of these situations and tell you which of the two paths we most often take.
Before the season starts, these seem like 50-50 decisions, but after the season's over, there's usually a clear victor in this. So hopefully we're on the right side of history. Yep. But I'm going to try to make the point right to you guys. I'm drafting this guy, not this guy.
And if you like this solid video, let us know down in the comments below. We might turn this into a series. I don't know, once every other week, once a month, something like that. Because as we know, ADPs often change over an Underdog and in your home leagues. We want to stay on top of that. And because of that, these are actually going to be basically in round order. We'll do round 1, round 2, round 3, so on and so forth. So let's kick things off at the top in the first round with Ashton, Jeanty, who's the 8th pick in round 1, and Quinshon McCaffrey, the 11th pick in round 1. The running back 4 versus the running back 5. Whose side are you on?
Right now, I'm leaning towards Quinshon McCaffrey. Today, in May and in early part of June, he's on the practice field and actually practicing. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have individually said they're optimistic about where he's at in his rehab. Remember, he went overseas to get those injections. So hopefully his Achilles and his calf and everything is good to go. Whenever he's been healthy, he's been dominant over the last 2 years, and that doesn't even include that first stint where he was absolutely electric with the 49ers. He's averaging 120 total yards per game, a touchdown per game, 3.5 receptions per game. The 49ers this year have the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL. As we record this episode right now, he's 28 years old. Just look at what Alvin Kamara did as a 29-year-old on a dog shit team. This 49ers team's actually going to be good. So there's just really not a guy that has as much upside as Quinshon McCaffrey does. If we start dealing with training camp injuries and stuff, then sure, we'll knock him back down. But right now, it's June. We're way ahead of the season, and he's out there practicing.
This is, I think, a great conundrum to start off with because you're going towards the rookie that everyone is super excited about versus the aging veteran who maybe some are nervous has reached his peak, or you can even see the cliff in front of him. That's despite, finishing as the running back 1 or running back 2 overall in scoring in each of his past 4 complete seasons. But we all got burned. If you had, the number 1 overall pick last year, missed training camp, missed practice. We were told it was a calf injury. It turned out to be Achilles tendonitis. But basically what you're outlining is we're almost in the exact opposite situation at this time this year as we were last year, in that if he is practicing and if he is playing, Quinshon McCaffrey is a workhorse. He's a bell cow in an offense that is projected for the top 7 most points in the league this year in comparison to the Las Vegas Raiders, who have absolutely improved and maybe outperformed this, but right now projected for the 6th fewest amount of points per game right now.
Yeah, I just have seen older backs, not super old backs, but I just went to the example with Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry also. So it wasn't that he was awful last year. He was just super injured. I watched that last game in the snow, and he looked pretty explosive in that until he had to leave that game. So yeah, I will change my tune directly. If he starts missing a lot of time in training camp, I'll see you guys in the 3rd and 4th round. I'll make a huge adjustment. But for right now, he is healthy, and he's not 32 years old. He is still 28 years old. And yeah, I still obviously love Ashton, Jeanty, and he should be a round 1-2 selection as well. But right. I think the hard part with Ashton Jeanty is he's just coming off a season with 397 touches on his body. And we had talked about the rookie wall, and we're just coming off this crazy, crazy season. So I think both of these guys have a lot of injury risk. The reason why is because they're going to get the ball a ton because they're very, very good football players.
Well, let's talk about those touches because his new play caller is Chip Kelly with the Raiders. And, we talked about it a lot when he was hired for this team and during the draft process when they were looking at running backs, that his offenses in points scored as an NFL play caller went from 4th to 3rd to 13th to 27th. And that ranged from his first few seasons with the Eagles to his final one with the 49ers, which was miserable. But during that span, his rushing attempts on offense, 4th, 7th, 11th, and 5th. So it didn't matter if they were one of the best offenses or the worst offenses. His running backs touched the football. And I even went through those seasons and looked at the running backs that were on the team. Shady McCoy, in I believe this was 2013, 314 carries and 64 targets. The next year, 312 targets, and he was attached to Darren Sproles with 62 targets. Then final season in Philadelphia, DeMarco Murray plus Ryan Matthews, 300 targets. And again, Darren Sproles, 83 targets. And then you look at that singular season in San Francisco. Carlos Hyde plus Sean Drone. Yes, tip of the cap to you, Sean Drone. 291 carries and 72 combined targets. So Hayden, basically we're going to hover around at least 350 touches here for Ashton Jeanty. That is not so bad. And those were in 16 game seasons. And we're looking at a 17 game season here for Ashton Jeanty. So this is a workhorse. It's Raheem Mostert. It's whoever else behind him. And for that alone, I would totally understand if people do want to select Ashton Jeanty where he is going right now, where he has been steadily going since drafts opened up. Because as we talked about in his profile too, it's not just how many touches he gets, it's the explosive plays that he creates on those as well, creating yards for himself, both in singular runs and then back-to-back runs too.
I think for Jeanty to close the gap where CMC has been historically is he's got to catch a lot of passes. And I know last year he didn't catch as many passes at Boise State, but the years prior to that, he has. And you just mentioned all of those backs that you're talking about in Chip Kelly's history who caught a bunch of passes. If Ashton Jeanty's catching 50 plus passes per year, then he's going to be a round one pick. If that's closer to 30 and you're on this kind of mediocre Raiders offense, then I think that's where it's going to be a little bit harder for Jeanty to kind of match CMC. But yeah, we're talking about like super boom bust selections at the back half of a round one. And as I've been doing a bunch of drafts, I actually don't mind having the 10th, 11th, 12th pick in the draft and kind of double dipping. We got some nice running backs. We'll go watch the wide receiver video with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and Ladd McConkey. We'll get a couple other receivers. The back half of round one right now, I think, is looking pretty nice because you have guys like CMC and Ashton Jeanty sitting right there.
I, too, am taking Christian McCaffrey in this conversation, and that's even with the caveat that earlier on this summer, he was an early second-round selection, and now he's moved up to, the 10th overall pick, as we talked about. If everything still goes in a straight line and it's healthy, Hayden, where do you think he ends up in ADP closing in early September?
He'll probably be right next to Jahmyr Gibbs, and it'll just come down to, are you a running back bro or a wide receiver bro? But I think that Christian McCaffrey is like headed towards the 7th overall, 6th, 7th, 8th overall selection. So we'll see. Now, it just takes one report, one setback for this thing to go back towards 15th, 20th overall too. So yeah, we're shooting for upside, but you have to come in first or second place to advance. And Christian McCaffrey's upside is like generational.
This is as simple as if you think he's healthy or not and is going to stay healthy or not. Now, all running backs miss a lot of time every single season, but I wouldn't begrudge anyone that ranks Christian McCaffrey as the running back 3 or heck, maybe even running back 2 in fantasy football this year. Hopefully you get a gist of this. If you like what you're listening to and you're not subscribed, what are you doing? Be a part of the, 50.7% of the people that have watched this channel over the last few weeks and hit that subscribe button. Hopefully our goal is to make you smarter, make you draft better ahead of your fantasy football seasons. And the other best way to do that is to go and play on the dog app, Underdog Fantasy. So click the link in the description, use promo code The Show, and you can start your best ball drafts right now. It's the perfect way to practice ahead of the home league that you care so much about. All right, let's go to round 2. The 3rd pick in the 2nd round is Drake London. The 5th pick in the 2nd round is AJ Brown. They are back-to-back wide receiver selections. A guy who now has a new quarterback versus someone in AJ Brown who just posted, let's say, his worst season statistically in an Eagles uniform. Which side are you going with?
I'm on Drake London here. You just look at the expected points, which is takes your targets, how close you are to the end zone, how close you are to the sideline, all of that stuff put into a number. Drake London last year, 13.2 expected half PPR points. AJ Brown, 9.6. That's quite a big gap. Now, AJ Brown is one of the most efficient wide receivers in like league history. So he does close that gap. And there's a chance that AJ Brown gets more targets this year than he did last year, which I don't even think he got to triple digits in targets last year, which is just insane. Nope. But the Falcons defense is not good. The Eagles defense is one of the best. And then I think you can also make a little bit of an upside case right now with Drake London having Michael Penix, who's just kind of like letting the ball rip downfield. This was the case at Washington. It was the case in his 3-game stint to close the year where Drake London absolutely took off against some easy opponents in overtime. But I just think that the Falcons are going to have to get the ball to Drake London. This new regime in Atlanta has done a good job of moving Drake London inside and outside the formation. To me, Drake London does not have any flaws to his game. He can win at all 3 levels, from the slot and from the outside. So to me, he's like a good football player in his own right. And I think it's just going to be a little bit difficult for this Eagles team to kind of turn back the clock where AJ Brown was getting the target that he quite frankly deserves, because that defense is still kick ass. They still have Saquon Barkley. The offensive line still looks really good. So I just think the discrepancy in targets here is probably going to be a little bit too much to overcome. Nothing to say bad about AJ Brown. It's just the environments here are totally different.
Final 3 games with Michael Penix last year, Drake London had 8 targets, 13 targets, and 18 targets, albeit 2 of those games went into overtime. I'll just make some of the case here for AJ Brown because he led the NFL in yards per route run versus man coverage last year, 4.31 yards. The next closest was at 3.85 yards.
He's pretty good.
4.31 to 3.85. It's like you said, his 97 targets that were the problem. And part of that, it's not just 97 targets. He missed 4 games, last year. Because in previous years, with really, really good Philadelphia Eagles teams, he had 88 catches for nearly 1,500 yards and 11 scores, and then 106 catches for nearly 1,500 yards and 7 scores.
Yeah.
I don't see how he can't go back to that. In fact, to me, AJ Brown as an individual is not a problem at all. If we ever got back to, again, that 150-ish target mark, he absolutely makes his mark inside of the top 5 wide receivers in fantasy football. I would even bring up, if my mind serves me correct, that Jalen Hurts was a bit of a problem at times last year too, in terms of playing up to his abilities like he does in gotta have it pivotal situations like he did in the playoff and like he did in the Super Bowl. We didn't always get those performances in the regular season. So I like taking both of these players, but I do feel like if we were ever to get a slight discount on AJ Brown, it's basically now when, again, he had 60 fewer receptions and the same amount of touchdowns and 400 fewer yards than he did the previous season, even though him as an individual was maybe better than ever.
Yeah, no, he's one of the best receivers in the league. So he has more upside than what Drake London does if the Eagles defense regresses, if for whatever reason Saquon Barkley misses time and they're forced to pass the ball more. But just look at last year. They had 28 fewer pass attempts than the number 31 offense in the regular season last year. So this is like a structural reason why they just don't pass the ball. It's because they're really good. So yeah, I think 60% of the time plus Drake London is the answer. If you want to dream completely big and go AJ Brown, totally get that. And if AJ Brown falls past ADP, like you've got to be really pumped. Just by the way, looking at last year's round 2 selections versus this year's round 2 selections, it's like a night and day difference. Like I feel so good about AJ Brown and Drake London, where last year we were making up names to put at 13th, 14th, and 15th overall. And all
Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr. Yes.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, I'm with you. Specifically on Drake London's role, and there was a period, I think it was in October, that we went on Stats versus Film, which can't wait for you all to watch that this year, that he started being utilized more and more and more in the slot as this power bully, but also has a great feel for that area of the field. And as we know, dating back to his time with USC, he can win after the catch there too. On 231 slot routes last year in totality, he was targeted 73 times. He also had the highest end zone target share, according to Rich Rebar, of any wide receiver in the NFL last season at 60%. The next closest player was at 46%. And then he also had the 4th highest target share when the quarterback was blitzed. So he was kind of the go-to player in those schemes, in those situations. So this is like a mainstay of who the Falcons are now, of putting Drake London inside closer to the formation and then allowing him to work in those areas. And the more often he's there, the more often he's going to get targeted as well. Again, love both these selections. I just will continue to side with AJ Brown, but it's not by very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. 50-50.
Round 3. But again, 50-50, it makes it sound like, give or take, it's equal. One of these decisions can make your fantasy season, and the other one can totally destroy it. So let's lead them in the right direction. And that brings us to round 3. And Tyreek Hill at the 305 versus Rashee Rice at the 304 has not been, let's say, clean and crystal clear last 365 days for either of these players. Rashee Rice right now is being drafted as wide receiver 15. Tyreek Hill as wide receiver 16. Break the tie. Which side are you going with?
I don't think this one's close. I want Rashee Rice here. Apparently, he's already practicing. He did not tear his ACL. There was you had to go to literally med school to figure out what this actual injury was. But the bottom line is he's out there and actually moving his body and looks good out there. The second part of the Rashee Rice stuff is there's still not a court yet for his criminal case. And that's a very complicated case because there was how many people involved with that and how many cars involved. So That's not going to be settled this year, most likely. So I don't expect a suspension. I expect him to be out there for week 1. If we have full go Rashee Rice in week 1, he's a top 12 wide receiver. Look at like his last 16 healthy games. He's been completely dominant. And there's a chance that this Chiefs offense goes back to those previous years where Patrick Mahomes was actually in MVP races. So right now, like huge stock up for Rashee Rice this offseason because quite frankly, it's been pretty quiet. And I would say on the flip side with Tyreek Hill, it's been very noisy over there. And there has been a decrease in the production in multiple ways on the Tyreek Hill side. So both guys are risky, very similar players on and off the field. But Rashee Rice to me is an ascending player on an ascending offense. And I cannot say the same about the Miami Dolphins.
I think they're quite different on the field. Question for you, though. Do you think the days of, the wide receiver 4 in points per game in 2022 and the wide receiver 1 in points per game in 2023, those days are just totally behind Tyreek Hill?
There's 2 stats that I found that I think point to that being the case. Targets 20 plus air yards down the field, these deep targets in those 2 seasons where he was a monster, 848 yards, 720 yards. This last season, only 201. So it's like a quarter of the production. And then also last year, Devon Achane had more screens than any player, regardless of position, in the last 3 years. This last season, Tyreek Hill only had 10 receptions on screens. That was cut in half in those 2 previous seasons. Throw in Jonnu Smith, who also got a lot more screens than Tyreek Hill. So
I would say that's because like a total lack of a running game, though.
Right. But the fact that Tyreek Hill is not getting screens or deep targets makes this thing hard to get back to where he was previously.
To me, if the running game gets better, the screens will decrease for Achane and Jonnu Smith, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. And so maybe more and more will go in the direction of Tyreek Hill. So I think it's tough to sit back and even look at season-long stats for the Miami Dolphins last year because it was just a roller coaster. And honestly, the offensive floor fell out from underneath him, not just from the quarterback situation, but also because of an offensive line situation. From a quarterback stuff, if we look at where Tyreek Hill finished on average when Tua played every single snap in certain games, he averaged 13.1 half PPR points. That would have been good for the wide receiver 15 in points per game. So again, despite it being a roller coaster of a situation, the points there are still on average of where you are and slightly even better of where you're selecting him this year as wide receiver 15. And that is, again, totally different than where this offense finished 2-1 season ago. I don't know if they can ever reach those heights again, because if we look at the trajectory of kind of who the Dolphins are, we probably have seen their peak already of Mike McDaniel. And I don't know if we can ever get back to that moment. But man, 170 targets in each of the prior 2 seasons, 1,700 yards. So I guess I just asked myself, is this the case that we see the cliff, or is it just 1 year where plenty of things went wrong, and can he bounce back from a down year where it wasn't just him that had a bad season? It was a whole bunch of other elements that had a bad season around him too.
So in those 2 games this last year, 1.8 yards per route run, which is fine, but it's not elite stuff. The previous seasons in Miami, 3.7, 3.1. So there are some like cliff signs here. And we've talked about this in previous shows, like aging receivers. You see the cliff. Now's the time to kind of get out of there. And then I'll also throw out wrist surgery this offseason. He had the trade demands earlier in the offseason. He says he doesn't deserve to be a captain because he's been such a bad teammate and stuff. Like there's a lot going on with, quite frankly, both of these guys. But just the fact that Rashee Rice is out there and just like moving already, and there's not anything with this criminal case yet, to me is like every single day that passes and there's no news for Rashee Rice just means his ADP is going to go higher and higher and higher. And if I had to guess, by August, I think Rashee Rice is going to get close to the kind of T. Higgins, Ladd McConkey, kind of late middle round 2 range. And I think now is the time to buy Rashee Rice, just because I only see this ADP going one way.
He, I think, saw 40% of his team's targets when he was on the field last year for those first few weeks. He was definitely going to be that team's wide receiver 1. Again, though, once he went down and Hollywood Brown wasn't playing and Xavier Worthy was learning how to play wide receiver in the NFL, and we've seen the cliff for Travis Kelce too. This team was 15th in points scored at 22.6. So yeah, layup routes, yak power. I guess my question is, I understand he's practicing. I'm sure he looks good in OTAs and all this stuff, But what if some of that explosiveness gets sapped from him? Some of the power does get sapped because this was a significant knee injury that happened to him last year. And it's, credit to the beat writers that are giving us their opinion, but it can be very different once you see them on Sundays. And we're really not going to be able to see that until we get there. And to me, like, he is a very one train type of player. He has one skill set that he's very good at, and it definitely fits with this offense. But if he's 80% of what that was last year, to me, you're getting a vastly different outcome than what we saw at the beginning of last season, where he would have ended up being a top 10, top 8 scorer at the position last season.
Yeah, I think he might have been a top 8, top 10 overall type of player if he stays healthy. Just because, and we can kind of like remove Travis Kelce, not from this podcast, we'll get to him later, but kind of just from the equation of what's holding back Rashee Rice. Like Kelce's kind of taken for sure a step back. So now it's just him versus Worthy. So yeah, it just comes down to like the health. But I would say Tyreek Hill also has some health risks as well. Like, is he still as fast at this age? Is his wrist actually okay? I guess we'll find out.
I'm not saying I'm avoiding either of these guys. I just don't know if I have the confidence to select either of them in this spot too. So
are you fading both? Kind of like there's some running backs, there's some quarterbacks.
I'm not fading both. I'm definitely not fading both. I would lean still Rashee Rice more, even if I do admit there are plenty of questions for both these guys here.
Yeah.
And that's not even talking the obvious environmental differences too. Again, Hollywood Brown hopefully has a season where he's playing on the field, and then Xavier Worthy actually has like a legitimate role and is a good player, a good receiver in the NFL. And again, those were different situations than when Rashee Rice was dominating the passing game for this Chiefs offense too. Sure. So I just don't want to copy and paste what he did in the first few games of last year and say he's destined for that too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Worthy was very good in the short yardage situations too. So if that's not all of those looks, and that's just a majority of them, that's going to hurt.
Round 4, more wide receivers. Travis Hunter, the rookie, being selected with the 7th pick of the 4th round. Jameson Williams, the 9th pick of the 4th round. That is wide receiver 24 versus wide receiver 26. Questions for both. Hayden, get into it. Which one do you want to discuss?
Well, today I just watched Travis Hunter at corner make one of the most ridiculous interceptions you'll see. So he is mixing in at corner. I think for the most likely scenarios, he's going to play 75% of the offensive snaps, probably play like third downs at corner. They want him to be more of a receiver, but he's going to be playing both. That does hurt Travis Hunter in median projections. The upside case, especially with Liam Cohen and his screening involvement, how good Travis Hunter is, there's a clean path. I find Jameson Williams also very, very kind of up in the air as well, just because the Lions last year were by far the highest scoring team in the NFL. And even with that, Jameson Williams was like a contributing player, but did not completely go off. He only has one career game above 5 receptions. And I think at some point we have to look at the interior of this offensive line where a rookie guard is now going to be playing center because Frank Ragnow retired. They have a new left guard, and then their right guard has been in the system for a little bit, but is coming off of a down year, and he's an older player. So maybe this offensive line is not going to be as dominant. I don't expect the Lions to score nearly as many points as they did last year. So I'm kind of struggling to draft Jameson Williams. So my kind of trick answer to all this is I want Ted Rowe and McMillan over both of these guys, and they're kind of all drafted the same. But that's going to be my little trick answer here.
Well, Ted Rowe McMillan is a couple of picks later, earlier, I should say, at the beginning of the 4th round, while these guys are mid 4th round picks. Let's talk about Jameson Williams because he finished as the wide receiver 18 in points per game last year. We know that he lost Ben Johnson, who deployed him perfectly, and we'll talk about that in a moment. His name was mentioned in trade talks, like kind of floated out there by every national insider, even though the Lions have shot that down. This team, again, lost their starting center in Frank Ragnow, offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. And what I love most about Jameson Williams, though, as an individual, is that he evolved his game. Early on in his career, he was viewed as just this 9-route, go ball, vertical threat. But how Ben Johnson weaponized his speed was on a lot of these crossers, both drag routes, closer line of scrimmage, or almost scissor routes over the middle of the field. And because of that, Hayden, he stole from Sam Laporta, in my mind. Like the underneath stuff, like he was just simply able to win with the ball in his hands and just run away from zone coverage or man corners that were trying to stay in his hip pocket and keep up with him when he was up to full speed. I know that Dan Campbell went out there and said, quote, he's gotten so much stronger in his game. It's not even just like do we believe in Jameson Williams, the individual? Because I do now, because there's obvious areas of where he succeeds. It's just a much larger conversation and question of, do we believe that this offense, at what percentage is it going to sustain its success that it did last year, now under a new coordinator? But at the same time, if we're comparing him to who he's up against here, there's some massive questions for Travis Hunter at the same time.
Last year, the Lions averaged 33 points per game. If you look at the implied team total in the betting markets, like every single game, weeks 1 through 18, the Lions are projected for 25.5 points. That's a touchdown difference per game we're expecting this year. That's still the third highest scoring team in the NFL. Yep. So it's going to still be a really good offense, but a touchdown per game being kind of evaporated is a big deal. And I think especially with Jared Goff losing his coordinator and some of the interior offensive linemen I talked about, makes me just a little bit nervous that we're kind of buying the peak of Jameson Williams and not making a more realistic case where like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and Jahmyr Gibbs are just funneled looks, and Jameson Williams kind of this boom bust player. So obviously with Travis Hunter, there's nobody more boom bust before the draft because we don't even know how many snaps he's going to play. I just think like there's a chance that Travis Hunter is a top 12 fantasy wide receiver this year. And I think that's going to be pretty difficult for Jameson Williams to do unless like Amon-Ra and Gibbs are missing time here. I think there's just a chance that Travis Hunter is like just so transcendent. And I just don't think that Jameson Williams has that overall skill set that's going to help us in fantasy.
Stick with me here. I kind of think the Lions and how many pieces they have is 49ers-esque now. And almost one person has to be limited or not get there in order for the other pieces to overperform their expectation. We know that Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to get his no matter what, right? But I guess my comparison with that is you either have to believe that Jameson Williams performs above expectation or Sam Laporta performs above expectation, because the prior year for Laporta, he had 86 catches, 900 yards, and 10 scores. And then some of it because of injury, he took a massive step back. But I also believe that coincides with the heightened use and the understanding of how to, again, weaponize someone like Jameson Williams. And that's why he totally blast off here. From Ian Harditz, a great stat here. Only A.J. Brown, Mike Williams, and George Kittle have managed to crack the 1,000-yard mark on fewer targets than Jameson Williams received last season. So I just don't think that the Lions offense is going to run as hot as it did last year, as perfect as it did last year in all phases. And so that's why if I'm on the clock between these two, I'm actually selecting Travis Hunter more often than I am Jameson Williams. I think he's actually going to play more offense than you do. I think he's going to exceed that 75% mark. I did have a note written down, but again, that did change 20 minutes before we hit the record button when we finally did see actual physical motion and video evidence of Travis Hunter playing cornerback, because prior to that, it was only one photo that I had seen.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to play both. It'll be a lot more receiver. I mean, they pretty much called him a wide receiver, and he's going to play a little bit of corner. So yeah, let's just see what happens. Like, what if Jacksonville just rolls him out there? He sees 8 targets in week 1. They're like, yeah, let's just lean into that. So
again, we're talking about the offense with the third most projected points in Detroit versus one currently with below average projected points in Jacksonville. Right. I also think there's a chance in Jacksonville, and we'll get to their running back room in a moment, that they just lean so heavily on the passing game because they might not have enough talents at the running back room, versus we know how balanced Detroit plays and how they spread the points and the production around to so many other players.
Yeah, I think it's a fair take.
Guys, we have all been there. You got a shower, you check the mirror, you peel back the hair, and you see the hairline is receding. You're like, when did that happen? It wasn't like that 2 years ago, a year ago. But you don't want to do anything about it because it's just going to take up your time. You think that you have to go to an actual doctor's office, schedule this thing out months in advance. It's going to have these awkward conversations, and then it's going to take forever for it to end up working and to show results. That's simply not true. And Hims is here to bunk all of those bad thoughts and bad decisions. First of all, you can see new hair growth and hair restoration in 3 to 6 months using Hims. Also, Hims provides you with convenient ease of access to a range of hair loss treatments that work all from the comfort of your couch. And you get to choose from a personalized chewable, orable, or spray or serum treatments to find out which one works best for you. I cannot stress this enough. The process is simple and 100% online. So again, there is no uncomfortable doctor visits. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/underdog. That is HIMS.com/underdog for your personalized hair loss treatment options. HIMS.com/underdog. Results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. Round 5 with the 5th pick, George Pickens or Jordan Addison at 512. This is the battle of the wide receiver twos, Hayden. You've shown love to both of these players at multiple points in their career. One guy on a new team in the Dallas Cowboys, one with a new quarterback in J.J. McCarthy in the Minnesota Vikings. Which side are you on?
I think they kind of win in different ways, but they're more or less similar players. Like, I love them down the field and making some acrobatic catches. I think Jordan Addison's a more polished player, and George Pickens shows a little bit more athleticism overall. Just with the George Pickens stuff, Dak Prescott since 2021 is the quarterback 5 in success rate, the quarterback 3 in touchdown rate. He's averaging 262 yards per game since 2021. Compare that to any of the Steelers. I didn't even bother coming up with the Steelers stats across that same sample because they have been at the very bottom and everybody knows that. So right now I'm looking at the George Pickens higher on 4.5 touchdowns in the NFL season long pick'em lobby right now. That seems way too low. George Pickens is going to score touchdowns. He's going to be a full-time player in this offense. I don't think they want to run this offense through Jake Ferguson as a second or third option. It's going to be George Pickens and a huge tier break into the other guys. We don't even know who the wide receiver 3 is going to be on this team because it's going to be CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. The only pause I have is the new offensive coordinator is Clayton Adams. He's an offensive line coach. He comes from the Arizona Cardinals, and I think that he's going to be kind of in this Marvin Harrison role. So I think you're going to see a lot of isolated X wide receiver stuff and not a lot of creativity with George Pickens. But I do think George Pickens has the skill set to make the most out of it. And I would love to see some actual on-target passes to George Pickens, and I think Dak Prescott's going to finally deliver.
I agree somewhat that George Pickens has more to his game than he showed in Pittsburgh, but I also don't think it's too much. I think we also know who George Pickens is as a talent, where he kind of does win on that red line. And that's how, and the reason why he was brought in to this team was to be that X wide receiver, mostly on the boundary, to really free up CeeDee Lamb to play on the outside, but also, most importantly, play in the slot. Like, I am not expecting a high target season from George Pickens. I mean, he goes from being the wide receiver 1 on a team that threw the ball 29 times per game to now the wide receiver 2 on a team that throws the ball 37 times per game. Even if I'm not expecting a high target season, when he plays well and the Cowboys play well and he hits on these downfield passes, he will have spike weeks. Yep. He'll have big games. At the same time, you could say the same words for Jordan Addison, that despite, maybe his size and his frame, he's come up with these Houdini-like downfield, unbelievable catches. The question with that is, are you going to get those as often with Sam Darnold? And are they going to run the same exact offense with J.J. McCarthy as they did with Sam Darnold?
The Vikings are projected to be worse in scoring if you look at the implied team totals versus their average points last year. And then Jordan Addison individually scored 2.5 more touchdowns than his usage would indicate. There was many huge plays down the field that were wide open or some like kind of busted coverages that Jordan Addison benefited last year. TJ Hawkinson also missed half the season. That's going to be a little bit more target competition. This suspension with Jordan Addison, it could be coming. I wouldn't guarantee it either. Like, you can't trust the California and Los Angeles County court system. So I don't know if that's going to get processed in time, but a Jordan Addison suspension in theory could be coming this season as well. I just think like something happens to CeeDee Lamb. Like, I mean, George Pickens would go absolutely crazy. And the Cowboys are interesting because their personnel difference at wide receiver versus the running back room indicates that they're going to want to pass the ball a ton. But the coaching staff, when Schottenheimer and then Clayton Adams, an offensive line coach coming from the Arizona Cardinals, tells me that they want to try to run the ball. I just don't know if they're going to be able to do that. And then the defense is very up and down as well due to some injuries. So I would rather just like play the upside case and that George Pickens turns into like a well-rounded player. I think that more or less we kind of know who Jordan Addison is. And I'm at least a little bit curious that there's another level for George Pickens to get to.
It's such an interesting one. Another great stat from Ian Hartitz on Jordan Addison. His 19 receiving touchdowns are tied for the 5th most during the first 2 seasons of a player's career since 1998. And if you look back, and again, we can look at small sample sizes for anyone, weeks 9 through 17 last year, he was the wide receiver 10 in points per game. It was a bunch of those downfield shots. And the reason that they drafted him, as we go back and, look at the draft room and press conference stuff, is when Justin Jefferson would get these bracket coverages, basically Kevin O'Connell just wanted one person that he could rely on to win in singular isolated coverage. And Jordan Addison definitely does that. I don't know, man. I'm not like George Pickens' biggest advocate, biggest fan. I just feel like this team is so needy of any type of talent outside of CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott that you think that they could at least accentuate and magnify the strengths that he does bring to the table. And that this offense, especially this offensive line, which arguably is one of the best in the league, like, you don't think so? I think this offensive line could be one of the best in the league.
I think their offensive line is going to be good. They have a big left tackle question mark, and Zach Martin retired, but they still should be pretty solid. And I just trust Dak Prescott for making the most out of it either way.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at it in even a bigger positive than you were. That I would lean towards George Pickens in this one, which I don't know if I would ever say that on this podcast. But again, the areas that he won, they were starved for this last year. They tried it with Brandon Cooks. Jalen Tolbert was getting preseason hype. They even made the trade for Jonathan Mingo, but like having an actual like bona fide player that can do this, even if I don't think he can do as much as you do, would still allow me to think that, Dak Prescott can support 2 top 24 wide receivers. And, you're not having to draft George Pickens as a top 24 wide receiver right now.
Yep. And last note for Pickens, I know he's been kind of just a basket case. This is the year for him to lock in, like, new organization. It's a contract year.
Well, he's got to get paid.
He's got to get paid. And he basically declined the first offer because he wants to bet on himself and have a huge season. So if there's ever a season where you're going to see less temper tantrums from George Pickens, it's likely this one. And probably the main reason is because he actually has a quarterback.
Now, the other side is what former Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver has done better once leaving that franchise.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about the wide receiver 30 in Pickens versus the wide receiver 33 in Jordan Addison. And, sandwiched in between them is another wide receiver 2 in Jalen Waddle. And then, John Daigle and my guy and Calvin Ridley. So I'll let you decide which one of those players I'm picking the most.
It's got to be Waddle. I'm going Waddle.
Nope. Calvin Ridley. All right. Let's veer on over to round 6. And we get 2 teammates in a situation that we haven't been able to select 49ers wide receivers in the past. Jauan Jennings is the 4th pick of the 6th round right now. And Ricky Pearsall is the 2nd pick of round 7. So my question to you, which of these, I guess you can look at as a better value, or which of these just straight up would you take?
I want Jauan Jennings. You don't see late career breakouts like Jauan Jennings very often, but he's kind of reliably been doing it every single opportunity he gets. Without Deebo Samuel last year, 41% target share, according to John Daigle over there. In the 8 games where he played 70% of the snaps last year, 82 yards per game, 2.4 yards per route run. Like we said at the top of the show, the 49ers, their win total's at 10.5. They're expected to score a lot of points this year. They're expected to have the easiest strength of schedule on top of that. So we talked about Ricky Pearsall, and I think there's a man coverage aspect and the way that he moves that's different than Jauan Jennings. But Jauan's so polished in zone coverage, and he's so physical, and I think that's going to be helpful in the red area. And he's just a little bit more proven in what I'm getting here. So I'm not out on Ricky Pearsall. We discussed him heavily, but I do think that Jauan Jennings and the targets that he got last year, it's kind of hard for me to overcome that, even though I'm still targeting Ricky Pearsall in round 7.
Overall, I'm drafting a ton of both these guys. My highest exposure is on Ricky Pearsall over Jauan Jennings, but I can easily make the case for both. But most importantly, I just want to be adamant and advocate for drafting these wide receiver values on the San Francisco 49ers versus what we've previously had to do. And we know what happened in other seasons. But if we just look at the closing ADP of 2024, you were having to select Deebo Samuel as the wide receiver 11 on Underdog and Brandon Ayuk after missing all of training camp. So the best his value could ever be as wide receiver 18. And now you're able to get Jauan Jennings as the wide receiver 36 and Ricky Pearsall as the wide receiver 41. I mean, I kind of want to leave every single draft with one of these guys. On an offense, as we've discussed, is what, top 7 in scoring this year, with by far and away the easiest schedule of any team. If they don't make the playoffs this year, something chaotic has happened. We've also talked about kind of the wide receiver pairings in the past and how if they were facing a heavy zone team, then Deebo Samuel was more likely to have great numbers. A heavy man team, then Brandon Ayuk. It's somewhat similar stuff if we look at Jauan Jennings, who had a 2.43 yards per out run versus zone, and Ricky Pearsall, who was there at 1.99 yards versus man coverage. And that was, even in the first 4 games when he did absolutely nothing after coming off, being the shot in the freaking chest. So again, my higher exposure is on Ricky Pearsall. I can dive into that a little bit more, but just overall, I want everyone to take away, invest in these 49ers wide receivers when they're so cheap.
And with Brandon Ayuk, I think you can take some shots. He goes after both of these guys. That is an ACL plus MCL. I don't like multi-ligament knee tears. It didn't happen at the very beginning of the season either. I think that Ayuk is probably destined to miss September and kind of slowly work himself back into midseason. By the end of the season, Ayuk could be back to himself, and he's the guy that you really wanted the whole time. But I do feel pretty good that Jauan Jennings is going to be out there in 2 wide receiver sets for most of the year, if not the entire year. And I was pretty impressed with just how often he just absolutely threw dudes off of them, even against man coverage.
Yeah.
But I think he was very reliable in zone coverage, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I've discussed this numerous times, but Jauan Jennings is one of the ideal wins in the dark arts of wide receiver ways, the arm over stuff. He bumps off linebackers to get to his zone spacing. He wins through defensive backs, attacking his hands at the catch point. Again, 80 targets versus zone coverage, 33 targets versus man coverage. And again, just a great feel for zone man. He attacks the middle of the field where we know this team wants to throw to over and over again. His timing with Brock Purdy was excellent. I just think that Kyle Shanahan can do more things with Ricky Pearsall. Like the more he can sit in his office on a game-to-game, week-to-week game plan standpoint and be like, oh man, if I motion him in this direction or stack him in this way, it's going to give him a free release. And that's going to equal these massive downfield shots wide open like he got against the Detroit Lions. We also saw the whip routes, the return routes, the movement ability versus man coverage too, to, put defensive backs and corners on their heels. I'm just a big fan of Ricky Pearsall's game. I didn't expect him to go in round 1, but again, based on the circumstance that happened during the early parts of his rookie season and then barely seeing the football in like the first 4 games that he played to how he finished off the season, I think Ricky Pearsall might be in store for a massive, massive second year leap. And it's even a few pick discount in comparison to Jauan Jennings.
I kind of like this round 5 to round 7 window for some wide receivers. Like we've already mentioned like 6 names that we're more or less targeting.
Right. And again, we don't have to recirculate this, but we were trying to decide between Tyreek Hill and Rashee Rice in round 3 when just after them, someone like Chase Brown is taken, who we've talked about a lot, or one of the quarterbacks in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. The round 4 wide receivers, we had the debate between Travis Hunter and Jameson Williams. You could take your quarterback there in Jane Daniels. And again, what you're saying here, we like these wide receivers that you can take a round or 2 later on. So it's not, to me, as cumbersome to wait a little bit on wide receivers and fill out your room there as it has been in previous years, because just the situation. These are good players on good teams, and you're able to draft them much later now than you have been in previous years.
Yeah, the next 2 names, you can't say the same.
Because if you didn't select your running backs earlier, you're probably looking to the rookie running back market. So let's put 2 paths on the screen. One is the first pick of the 7th round. That is Quinshon Judkins with the Cleveland Browns. And 2 picks later, that's Kaleb Johnson with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Which one are you walking down?
I like Quinshon Judkins, the player, more. I like Kaleb Johnson, the fantasy asset this year, a little bit more. If you just look at the team environment here, not that the Steelers are going to be awesome on offense, but they're projected to win 8.5 games this year. The Steelers are projected for 3 more points per game than the Cleveland Browns, who are projected for the last in the NFL. They're only projected for 5.5 wins. Both of these guys are going to get the rock a ton. Like both of these guys were like showed workhorse ability. They have enough size to project. We've seen the Steelers in particular like really lean on a running back. And I think that this offensive line in Pittsburgh is only going to get better because they've invested a lot into the positions, but they're all still super young. So I think every single season they'll get better and better out there. I was looking at Mike Clay's projections, and he has the Steelers at 18th in rushing yards versus the Browns at 31st. So I know that he went later in the rounds in the NFL draft, but to me, Kaleb Johnson was kind of like just like the epitome of an outside zone bell cow. And that's what Arthur Smith kind of runs here. So I'll take the touches, which I think will be pretty equal. But I think that the Steelers are going to find the end zone more often, and they should be going near each other. But I'll go with the Steelers.
We're talking running back 24 and 25 here for Kaleb Johnson. Like you said, workload. We've heard from Mike Tomlin that one of the main reasons why they selected Kaleb Johnson was because at Iowa, he proved that he can handle 15, 20 touches per game. Zone running in a zone system. We discussed it during his profile that if he landed with the right spot, we would like him a lot, but he wasn't a fit for, I don't know, even 20 teams out there because of that. But he was selected 2-1 that does, and it absolutely makes sense. Like you said, I think they're 7th worst right now in average team total, but that's in comparison to the lowest in the league. Now, if you ask me at this very moment, which of these backs had more opportunities, more touches to end their rookie season, I think Quinshon Judkins will, because his running mates are Dylan Sampson, who was drafted a few rounds later. They clearly view Quinshon Judkins as a better player. And then Jerome Ford, who was on like a fine contract, but then they asked him to take even less money to come back and play in more of a receiving aspect. And he really improves one area where this team struck out last year. Rich pointed this out, that Cleveland running backs ranked 29th in the rate of runs that failed to gain yards last year at 21.4. Quinshon Judkins was really, really good at not allowing himself to be dropped for losses. Now, a big part of that was, playing at Ohio State versus the Cleveland Browns run blocking and running situation. I have a lot of shares of Kaleb Johnson in Dynasty, but I don't really have any shares of either of these in underdog drafts right now.
I haven't been drafting either one of them really that much, just because I think that they have like fine ceilings. I don't think that they have groundbreaking fantasy ceilings unless either one of these guys catches a ton more passes than what they showed in college. And they had like receiving numbers in their college profile. I wouldn't say it was like standout traits for either one of them. So we'll see. Yeah, I think that Jaylen Warren's kind of a fantasy to people that care about fantasy football. And I'm not sure if Arthur Smith really cares about Jaylen Warren. So I expect both these guys to get a bunch of touches. But, man, I would rather pay the premium. Give me Joe Mixon 2 rounds earlier, who I know what I'm signing up for on a better offense versus taking the discount and going kind of this uncertainty zone where I think it's going to be hard for either one of them to be like top 10 running backs this season.
Yeah, and Jaylen Warren is going 2 rounds later. I know I didn't mention many positives for Quinshon Judkins. I actually liked him way more than a lot of people out there. He was my running back 4, and he was selected, I believe, as the running back 3 in the NFL draft. So I love his stiff arm. I felt like the force his tackle stuff was totally indicative of the actual game that he brought to the table. But this might be a 2026 play versus I don't know how good the Browns are going to be in 2025. Yeah. And as we always talk about, like, touchdowns are really important for the running back position. Like, they are very important. And this right now is a team that everyone is banking on scoring the least amount of points in the NFL this season.
Also say in those Nick Chubb years, those Browns offensive lines were like the best, or if not the best, right there. Those guys have dealt with so many injuries. Like, I don't know, man. Like, that Browns offensive line like has some names on paper, but it's like kind of like the ghost of those guys. And I wouldn't even call it a good offensive line anymore.
Let's go to round 8. Interesting was maybe 2 slot guys that you have to decide between. Josh Downs with the 6th pick of the 8th round, or Cooper Kupp, the 4th pick of the 8th round. Who are you selecting more often and why?
I want Josh Downs here. And the primary reason is Anthony Richardson's either going to get better or he's going to get benched. And in either case, that's good for Josh Downs. In the 7 games without Anthony Richardson last year, 65 yards per game, 2.4 yards per route run, 30% targets per route run. Those are really good numbers. Those are like kind of belong like the 4th, 5th round. Now he doesn't play in 2 wide receiver sets because he's like more of a true slot wide receiver. But either Andy Richardson's better or Daniel Jones is in there. And I think they're gonna have to run a lot of the RPO stuff that does benefit Josh Downs. So he's a explosive player, for a slot type, he can actually win downfield. You've seen that in each of his seasons in the NFL. With Cooper Kupp, that's going to be a really run-first offense like the Colts are. And I'm not sure if he's like guaranteed to be in 2 wide receiver sets all year long either. So I think I'll just go with a younger player here. And I think, quite frankly, I think both Josh Downs and Michael Pittman are a little bit underrated in fantasy just because we have uncertainty at the quarterback position. But I think that uncertainty actually provides a little bit of value versus their ADP.
I'm in on Josh Downs as well. I think he's the Colts' best wide receiver. And I can't say the same for Cooper Kupp right now on the Seattle Seahawks. And it's to the point that you said, if we hear about consistency one more time, and every time that we do, that points in the direction of Daniel Jones. I think Josh Downs is miles better of a player than Wan'Dale Robinson. And look at what Daniel Jones was able to feed Wan'Dale Robinson in offense that maybe doesn't have as good of play calling. And then obviously Josh Downs has a bigger, more broader game than someone like Wan'Dale Robinson. And Cooper Kupp, I went back actually and watched some Clint Kubiak stuff with the New Orleans Saints. I know once that signing happened, even focused, well, these are 2 guys that spent the vast majority of their time as slot wide receivers. And, this is an offense with Kubiak that ran multiple tight end sets and all this type of stuff. So who's going to play on the outside? Their formations are so condensed that basically these are slot wide receivers. Even if they're listed as outside wide receivers, they can still attack certain areas of the field that, other guys, if your formation is so wide and then you move inside. Anyways, you get what I'm trying to say. I still like Cooper Kupp as a player. I'm not certainly avoiding him in drafts.
Yep.
Like you said, I just think the upside of Josh Downs, if we finally get a Shane Steichen mind being actually put into practice on an NFL field, then to me, Josh Downs might be the biggest beneficiary of that among all Colts wide receivers.
Yeah, totally agree with you, especially on the Saints Kubiak stuff and just the bunch sets. I do still wonder though with that offense, like the best of the Kubiak stuff is like under center play action bombs downfield. Like, are we really going to be like under center play actions to like run an out route to Cooper Kupp? Like, I'm not sure if that's kind of like the point of the whole system. So I think that there's still some like issues with the Seahawks offense, like system versus their personnel. But maybe Cooper Kupp is like fast again. That would be kind of shocking because of all the injuries that he's had. But yeah, I think it just comes down to like Josh Downs has a chance to be the team's leading guy, and that'd be pretty amazing if Cooper Kupp like goes back and just beats out JSN.
Josh Downs is really good at football. Really good at football. Okay. Let's talk about aging tight ends because 3 of them are being selected in round 9. Let's look at Travis Kelce, the 2nd pick of round 9, Jonnu Smith, the 5th pick of round 9, and Mark Andrews, the 12th pick of round 9. This is an interesting area, I think, in general to select at this position. Which one are you most interested in? And is there one that you're like totally avoiding here?
I'm going to kind of cop out here and just kind of depends if I have Lamar Jackson, who I draft a ton, or if I have Mahomes.
This is not the point of this video is to tell people, if I stack the quarterback, then I'll stack the tight end. Okay.
I just don't really care about the tight end position all that much. Now, I will say the price tags have completely dropped in tight end land. And like this is what the tight end 6, 7, 8 pretty much. And they're going in the 9th round. Like that used to be in round 4 or 5. So these guys are interesting. With Kelce versus Andrews, both of these guys have lost a step, but the big difference was just the touchdown production. And Mark Andrews ran completely pure. According to my touchdown model, he was supposed to score 5.2 touchdowns. He scored 11. Travis Kelce, even though he has Patrick Mahomes, was on the opposite end of this chart where he should have scored 8.2 touchdowns. He scored 3 of them, which is like almost as bad as the Trey McBride stuff. And then Jonnu Smith was kind of right in the middle where he scored exactly how many points he was supposed to score. Jonnu Smith, Kelce, and Andrews, I think, are at risk of like not getting the same targets as they did last year. So I guess I'll go with Jonnu, but I don't love that. And I think if I'm going to be breaking the tie, I don't think that Jonnu Smith's going to get traded. He wants to be in Miami. I think that we got that trade speculation because the Steelers probably made a good offer for Jonnu. And then Jonnu's like, you know what? I'll just kind of stay on my contract or take a minimal contract raise here and just stay in Miami where he trains and wants to live. So if that's the case, I guess I'll just go with the Jonnu kind of fake production, but I don't feel good about any of these guys.
This might be stupid, but I'm drafting Mark Andrews the most of this group. It's not much. I'm just drafting, David Njoku 2 rounds later than any of these guys. But for Mark Andrews, yes, he scored, I think, 10 touchdowns in the final 12 games of last year. And 35% of his fantasy points were via touchdowns. But at the same time, Andrews was great during that portion of the season when the team continued to be good.
Yes.
Now I can take a step back and say, is it out of the realm of possibility that Isaiah Likely just totally supplants Mark Andrews in 2025 and outperforms him? It might. I'm not going to say it's likely, but it might be
possible.
Like a 50-50 split. I can totally see it. The one I'm out on the most is actually Jonnu Smith. So it's interesting to hear you say that. Again, Tyreek Hill took a huge step back, as we talked about. Jalen Waddle, huge step back. The running game was non-existent. If any one of those things take a step forward this year, it means that Jonnu Smith is no longer going to be a pillar of this offense. Yeah. And heck, 2 of those things might take a massive step forward this year. And to me, that just places Jonnu Smith further down the pecking order. And I'll reiterate the stat that he had 28 targets and 23 receptions behind the line of scrimmage. And he was basically, along with Devon Achane, a de facto piece of the running game. Yep. And I'm not expecting, the Dolphins offensive line or rushing attack to miraculously be, top 10 in terms of success this year. But if they go from 31st to 23rd, that's a massive jump in the necessity of getting Jonnu Smith the football.
Yeah, last year, Jonnu had more screen targets than Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill combined. That doesn't seem like a sustainable formula. So, yeah, I'm not expecting any of these guys to repeat what they did the last season. I guess Kelce can get lucky with the touchdowns just because he ran so unlucky last year. But yeah, I think it comes down to it, go 4 rounds past this. Do the tight ends really project that much differently? I don't know. And I feel like I can say that there is a cliff at the running backs and wide receivers between those two. So it's not a great range to be drafting tight ends. And there's just really not that many good tight end clicks, period, right now.
I understand stacking and I understand playing for a specific week toward the end of the season. But just from a theoretical standpoint, if you are drafting Rashee Rice in round 3, you cannot be drafting Travis Kelce in round 9 because they basically play the exact same position on this team. And Travis Kelce was non-existent in the games that Rashee Rice was going off and dominating and being the lead target getter for this Chiefs offense. And again, you also brought up how his 8.5 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns were career lows. That was after the guy that basically took his job and his role in his area of the field in Rashee Rice missed the vast majority of the season. So, Reeves even pointed this out with percentages. With Rice on the field, Kelce was targeted on 16% of his routes and just 16.7% of the team's targets. That jumped up 24% on both without Rashee Rice, and it still resulted in a pretty bad season. So I'm not really targeting Travis Kelce if I think Rashee Rice is going to be able to play football in 2025.
I've also seen pictures of Travis Kelce. He seems to be enjoying his off season, which I don't blame him. He has a mustache like you now. Yeah, his is better. I'm trying to emulate him. We look about as big though.
Okay, another pair of teammates, and this one has been a hot topic right now on Twitter. Let's talk about it. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars running back situation that many people are classifying as, if you get this one right, it might win you your fantasy football season. Travis Etienne, the 9th pick of the 10th round. Bhayshul Tuten, the rookie, the 12th pick of the 10th round. I think the reason why some people are designating it as such is because we just saw what Liam Cohen did with the Bucs backfield with Bucky Irving, and they're believing someone of this Jaguars backfield is going to step up and take the reins and being the lead ball carrier. Will they?
It's going to be a committee, and there's not even just Tuten and Etienne. I'm sure you're going to bring them up. Tank Bigsby is very clearly in this mix as well. I can see all 3 of them establishing roles here. It is something that we should be paying attention to just because other than the Cowboys, this is the latest a team's RB1 goes on fantasy. We're talking about outside the top 100 picks. I think most likely there's going to be somebody that emerges as a top 100 asset because Jacksonville is probably going to be at least an average offense. And Liam Cohen was so damn good at scheming up multiple running backs in different ways, like on the ground and pulling and gap runs, but also screens and just there's going to be points here. I'm going with Etienne, and I'm not going to just ignore the 2024 numbers because they were brutal. Like if you look at like the top 60 players in carries, like he's like 57th yards after the contact. The numbers are really bad. I will say I did watch a bunch of Travis Etienne, and I cannot stress how bad this offensive line was. It's not that Jacksonville's offensive line was like totally overhauled this offseason. They made a couple improvements here and there, but still going to be a pretty rough one. I think the difference though is Liam Cohen just like coached the offensive line so well in previous stops that I'm hoping that Etienne could actually not be hit behind the line of scrimmage because he's not a powerful rusher. He needs a little bit of space to operate. And last year just did not get that. Like the yards before contact numbers were not pretty. So it's one of these where I think like we kind of like the narrative of last year where like the environment changes and all of a sudden these guys that we know are like have some talent, like he was a first round pick. All of a sudden the environment changes. And now their efficiency numbers go way up. David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs, there's been many of these guys before. I think Etienne's going to fall into that to some degree, but I anticipate this is going to be a committee approach because Tank Bigsby runs with more pop and power, and then Bhayshul Tuten's faster than both of them. So Etienne's going to have to kind of be kind of more like the Rashad White kind of catch passes type of guy. So we'll see.
Look, we're talking about the running back 37 and 38 here. So I'm not, getting frustrated with anyone taking a shot at any of these guys.
Correct.
My comment would be anyone but Travis Etienne. And this is for multiple situations and multiple reasons. I hear you on the offensive line not being good last year and being quite bad, but Tank Bigsby ran behind the same offensive line and just flat out outproduced Travis Etienne.
Yeah.
It was from week 1 through the entire season. So I think Tank Bigsby is just a flat out better football player than Travis Etienne is at this moment. I think Etienne has turned his game into being a volume sponge. And if he's not getting the volume, I just do not see how he gets there. Now, am I super psyched to draft Bhayshul Tuten? Not necessarily, who I think is super explosive, had some great underlying metrics, but then some really bad ones too. Yes. And then does that lead me then to, 150 overall, which is multiple rounds later, taking someone in the shot in the dark with Tank Bigsby? Probably, but I understand Tank Bigsby has major flaws to his game too, where he had, 4 fumbles and kind of runs into his blockers a bit too often. And, doesn't have the same draft pedigree as someone like Travis Etienne at the top. So I think there are honestly countless negatives on each of these players.
Correct.
So if you want to take a swing on them, go for it. I just don't even know if it's going to be a perfectly split like backfield as we go along. I think someone is going to come out on top here, but that might not happen until week 13, 14, 15, and 16 towards the end of the season. So yeah, I mean, I just want the cheapest shot of this backfield.
Yeah, I'm definitely in on Tank Bigsby where he's going between the two, just because they're being drafted back to back. I will go with Etienne. Just the history of him being a volume sponge, like getting volume, is a trait that we want in fantasy football. And then I'm just banking on Liam Cohen,
but not with this group,
right? But I think that the environment could be totally different here. And like Tuten, like even though he was efficient, he's very fast. He was not like Mr. Bell Cow in college either. And Etienne has been that for a long time. Last year, gap runs, 3.2 yards per carry for Travis Etienne. That's like the offensive line has to like create some space, and they just weren't. Now, I don't think this offensive line is going to be good. So I think the most likely scenario is these guys are going to have moments. It's not going to be really pretty. You should take.
What you're saying is there is no Bucky Irving that is most likely to emerge from this backfield,
or even Rashad White. Man, like Rashad White was very good in fantasy too last year, as well. Bucky Irving was just a little bit better. I would be surprised if there was somebody that takes over this backfield. I think it's going to be a committee approach, and there's even a chance that they trade Travis Etienne to the Cowboys on August 20th, and then maybe everybody kind of wins here. So yeah, take shots on target here because we know the offense is going to be decent enough. But I think all 3 of these guys are flawed players.
And there's also a chance, again, that the Jaguars just heavily lean into the passing game and aren't one of these as successful rushing attacks like the Bucs were last season, who had, one of the best offensive lines in the league, and Bucky Irving, who's a fantastic runner. Let's talk about Etienne for a second as an individual because, there were murmurs that around the NFL draft, again, from national insiders, that this team wasn't, believing in him as a feature back. Then he missed, I think, one practice in OTAs, and now he has returned. And because of all of that, Liam Cohen is getting asked about Travis Etienne's future, and everything he's saying is only positive. I will add, of course, everything he's saying is only positive. You're not going to crush one of the players in the media to everyone. At the same time, you can look at James Gladstone, who mentioned in an interview that Bhayshul Tuten was one of the players that he brought up when he was going through the GM interview process with the Jacksonville Jaguars, a target player for him. If this team was not able to trade up with the Cleveland Browns from 5 to 2, they were going to draft Ashton Jeanty there. And then after that, they were trying to land RJ Harvey and weren't able to do it. And so then they selected Bhayshul Tuten. This is also a guy that has 9 fumbles over the last 2 seasons. Again, I mentioned some really nice underlying metrics. He was 9th in forced missed tackles per attempt among this draft class, 8th in yards after contact per attempt. But at the same time, his worst stat, 113th in carries that ended in a first down or a touchdown. And his stuff rate of 22.6 is quite high. Just 6 running backs in the NFL hit that mark last year. So there's positives and negatives, I think, for every single one of these guys. And if that's the case, again, it might be like a meme at this point. I just don't want this debate between Tuten and Etienne for us to totally forget Tank Bigsby, who is an extremely explosive player in his own right. And if the key to this rushing game is creating explosives, he has that in his bag. And he showed it last year where he was a better player than Travis Etienne.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not ignoring Tank Bigsby. I don't think there's going to be a super smash pick here. And there's guys like Tony Pollard and Aaron Jones and James Conner who kind of did ice the up and coming guy. And then on the flip side of that, you do have Devon Achane and Bucking Irvings, which is like the Bhayshul Tuten side of this thing, where there were some holes in the profile, but they absolutely went crazy because of the untapped ceiling. So there's guys you can point to on either side of the Etienne versus Tuten equation. And yeah, we can't ignore Tank Bigsby. This is like a 3-man race.
And at some point we'll do the Cowboys running back situation, but I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that because the first one off the board there doesn't go into the 11th round in Javonte Williams. Okay, we're going to give you a +1 here to make this 11. And let's close out with wide receivers on the same team. He's been in the news. Stefon Diggs is the Patriots' first wide receiver off the board with the 8th pick of the 7th round. And then Kyle Williams, the rookie from Washington State in the 3rd round, the 10th pick of the 10th round. When preparing for this video, it went from Stefon Diggs having videos on a yacht with substances and women to missing OTAs to then joining his team, being on the field for OTAs and practicing. Did we have a little bit of a dip there? Is there a bit of a conversation that we should be having between these two guys? Which one do you want more?
Well, he was looking pretty fast in those OTA clips, and I wonder if the substances on the boat were helping him run a little bit faster than otherwise. But to me, it's like what happens on Memorial Day weekend stays on Memorial Day weekend, especially with Cardi B on a boat here. So to me, this is going to be a story
and
that
friends.
Really does not. Yes, exactly. Really does not matter whatsoever. He went to OTAs and was healthy. To me, the biggest story here was I wasn't sure if Steph Diggs was going to be running and cutting and looking faster than a lot of the players in those drills. To me, I feel pretty optimistic that Steph Diggs is going to be out there for week 1. And before all this nonsense, I wasn't sure what to expect with that just because of when his ACL tear was. So to me, this was kind of a good thing the last couple of days that I saw him in OTAs. And I also say for the Patriots, they need a little juice that. This team's been really boring, and it's a different style leadership, but maybe this team might have a little bit of fun, and maybe all this is actually good news for the Patriots organization, who desperately needs Steph Diggs to be out there week 1, but I think that's going to be the case.
He was moving great. And, just as a player to find soft spot in zones and especially win inside the red zone, which he was a major part for the Texans when he played there before getting injured, that's where he was doing his best work. And, scoring touchdowns is going to be big for this team, a reliable threat in condensed fields. And again, understanding and having, the pairing with Drake May of, we're going to sit in a space in this spot and the timing of the route is going to be here. I'm going to hit you at this moment. They need someone to do that. At the same time, Hayden, we have Kyle Williams, who you and I really liked coming out of Washington State, was a 69th overall pick. Not often are third round wide receivers being selected in the top 10 rounds of fantasy football. But that's exactly what we are getting at this moment. I did go back and kind of look at some overperforming wide receivers that were selected in the same exact range in recent years. So if we look at Tank Dell, who was also the 69th overall pick in his draft class, he was going undrafted as the wide receiver 75 in closing ADP, but he finished that season as the wide receiver 16 in points per game. Josh Downs, the 79th pick in the same draft, wide receiver 89 in closing ADP, finished his rookie season as the wide receiver 54. So again, Kyle Williams, third round pick, 69th overall, wide receiver 58 in current ADP. Where do you think Kyle Williams is going to finish out the season?
I'm drafting Kyle Williams, and there's a kind of like a tier
I still
break
am
for him. I know. I will say, like, he's being drafted as early as an early third round pick at wide receiver has ever. Like, most of these guys are usually undrafted, and he's being drafted a lot. It's because he's way better than the other options aside from Steph Diggs, and I think he's going to be a week one starter. And he can play inside and outside. And I thought that he had like some like pretty high upside traits. I'm still kind of curious why he didn't go as early as I hoped in the draft. But man, like his wow plays and his speed and his yards after the catch ability, and I'll even say
beats man coverage, getting off press, his releases, all of it. And that's exactly what this team needs, you know?
Right.
And they can actually maybe complement each other quite a bit too.
Yeah, well, I think Steph Diggs is going to be more of like a slot guy within 10, 15 yards of line of scrimmage, and maybe even beneath that. And I think that Kyle Williams can do that. I mean, watch the Kyle Williams cut up of him just catching the ball in the screen game or within 5 yards on these little shallow crossing and his speed. But Kyle Williams can win 25, 30, 40 yards downfield. And I'm not sure if we're going to see that with Steph Diggs. So I think Steph Diggs is going to easily pace this team in targets. And I still do think that Kyle Williams does have some really interesting traits. And he's a little bit bigger than Tank Dell, but I don't think like that comp is that ludicrous here. It just requires Drake May to kind of turn into the CJ Stroud passing in pocket stuff to kind of get there. But yeah, he's worth a shot in the dark. And out of all the rookies, I think he's actually going to play. And there's plenty of rookies in this range who I'm not sure if they're actually going to see the field that much.
We've had this conversation in the past. Do you think it makes sense that Stefon Diggs is being selected 4 rounds ahead of Drake May?
Oh, man.
Because Stefon Diggs' price is pretty rich right now, man.
You think so?
A declining player coming off an injury, he's going earlier than some of the names we already talked about, and Josh Downs and Cooper Kupp ahead of Darnell Mooney, who we really like with the Atlanta Falcons. Like, this isn't some throwaway 10th round pick that we can make the case for, even if he hasn't done anything with Kyle Williams. You're still having to pay a pretty hefty penny here in the 7th round, where we can, you know, in the same round, Ricky Pearsall and company.
Well, I don't know. I would make Steph Diggs a pretty big favorite to be the wide receiver one on this team. As much as I love Kyle Williams, like as a rookie here, and a lot of those guys are kind of wide receiver 2s there. And to me, like going back to the beginning of this conversation, like boat party, awesome, cool for Steph Diggs. Him absolutely turning on a dime and looking explosive in June, to me, is like the win of all of this stuff. And like, we'll joke about this and we can make memes and stuff, I'm sure. But like, he's healthy, right? Like, he's relatively healthy right now. Like, to me, that's the big takeaway.
Would you rather have your veteran be on a yacht party or attend an anime convention in Japan?
Oh, I mean, I want the yacht party. I mean, we've seen this before.
Just quickly on the rookie stuff, Hayden and I aren't saying that rookies who are drafted later don't perform during their rookie seasons. I, just brought up Tank Dell, for example. We know Puka Nakua's rookie year, Amon-Ra St. Brown's rookie year. At the same time, and this is what we try to hope to do, there were plenty of players that were drafted a few rounds later than this in like Roman Wilson, Malachi Corley, Jermaine Burton, that you have to avoid those landmines. And, we weren't drafting those 3 guys at all. But I'm just saying that it's easy to say, oh yeah, there's evidence of this happening. And we actually think that there's a pretty high chance it can happen for Kyle Williams. But a lot of these rookie picks do miss at the exact same time too, in round 10 and later too. Yeah,
definitely so. He's probably going to be somebody that's going to be better late in the season. But there's a chance that he's just a week 1 starter on the outside and just put him in your lineup and hope for the best.
There aren't many other wide receivers selected in his area as well. I mean, it's Rashad Bateman, Rashid Shaheed, Marvin Mims, Christian Kirk, Jack Besh, Hollywood Brown. I mean, that's why I'm taking Kyle Williams. Again, if you want to do like a 2v2 of the 7th round, we can have, like we talked about, Caleb Johnson and Kyle Williams, or it's Stefon Diggs and Travis Etienne or Bhayshul Tuten. So these are like the 2v2s you're kind of working with in that spot.
Yeah. I like both the Patriots guys, but I like Drake May and I like both these guys individually. So
that's going to do it. Again, if you enjoyed this, let us know. You can even leave other comments and suggestions down below of, again, paths that and dilemmas you're having in your drafts, and see if we can help you and turn them into a video in the future. We keep mentioning Underdog in these ADPs. You all should be drafting at this very moment. Get started here in June, so you're a master by July and August. Use promo code The Show. Click the link in the description down below. We'll throw some extra bonus cash in your direction. Again, everyone's talking about best ball. If you've never played it, now's the time to do so, especially if you live in the great states of Missouri, Georgia, Texas, and California. Try out best ball for the very first time today. All right, that's going to do it. For Hayden, I'm Josh, and Weaves and Mosho, up the velo. We'll talk to y'all soon. See ya.